series is about our finds from eBay. Now some wagons are lovely when they turn up, some bits missing, like that. Sometimes wheels are missing, and sometimes they're broken. They always break these things. Sometimes they've been sitting in the window and they've gone strange colours. The old one seems to fade weird like that. Sometimes people fit loads which can't really understand, not sure what that is. It's like tar, it's horrible. And sometimes people whether they're sometimes they do weird things. I'm not quite sure what this is, but these all are place in life, and they've all got a future life. So in this series we're just going to take a few of them, do some repairs, make good, make them look a bit more respectable, and give them another lease of life. So do follow along, and this is the one we're doing today. So this Mineral Wagon from Hornby has got this weird emulsion colour on it. Can't get it off, not simply anyway, so we're just going to paint over it. We're going to do a bit of a number on this. Now lots of we see on these are weathered and they have rust, but they're just too pristine, so we need to sort of bend it up a little bit. So we're bringing out the hot air gun and we're going to give it a blast with that. The idea is to bend the sides a little so it looks like it's 21 tons of rock or steel, whatever's going to go in there, has at some point damaged the shape of the wagon, so it's not as square and as precise as they normally are. So lots of these are weathered on tracks and they've got rust, but they are just too sort of precise and too clean. The edges are very sharp. So we're using the hot air gun on this one, and you have to be careful with the gun because there is a point where it goes from solid to soft, and then it suddenly will go to liquid and it will melt like you wouldn't believe. So just do a little bit at a time. You'll start to feel when it starts to go a bit soft. Bend it into the shape you want, leave it a couple of seconds, and then it will go cold and set. And you can do dents in the side using a hammer or a pair of pliers or a nail, or whatever you got to hand. And we're just going to bend the sides. Difficult to see on this one because it's a strange colour, because it's this white and black. We can't see where the bends are, but they are there. Quickly before we get onto the paint, we're just going to remove some of the old bits of carpet, cat hair and the previous owner's DNA. And then on these older mineral wagons, the mould line goes right through the buffer, so just going to quickly take that off using the file, just to smarten up a little bit, just to make it look a little less model-like. I'm just using a little fret file here, but you can use 400 grit. Just going to take the top off like that, and we'll do the rest. Next thing we're going to do is primer. Now before I've done the primer, I've actually put a enamel lacquer over this out of a spray can, just to make the service uniform. Not quite sure what the paint is underneath and if it's going to react or how the paints are going to take to it. So enamel primer, and then we can prime over the top. Now I like to use a black primer. I think my gun's a bit blocked at this point, but anyway, we'll persevere. Now I like to use black because I mentioned before is once you put your colour on, if you should miss any bits underneath surfaces, it ends up looking like shadows, which is why we use black. And I just like the look of black primer. It just allows me to see everything that I'm doing, and the bits I'm missing, like lots of it with this with the gun blocked as it is. Now the edges I thought were a little bit sharp, and I should have taken them back when I'd done the bends earlier on. So we're just going to go around and just soften some of the edges off, put a couple of nicks and dings in there, just to make it look like it's had a life of dragging around its 21 tons of whatever it's had in it. So again, using my my fret files, just going to roughen it up a little bit. Now in future videos I probably won't show you that I'm going to prime wagons, because most people know what it looks like. When we do that I might mention it. I'll mention the fact that it's being done, and if it's anything different then I'll point it out. But this will probably be the only video where you can watch me priming one of the wagons, unless, as I say, there's a particular reason for it. So just going to quickly reprime over the bits that I've flatted back. Just make sure we catch all the underneath surfaces and all the bits that I've taken back with a file. Our next stage is the rust layer. So with this particular wagon we're going to do a hairspray chipping, so we're going to paint it in the rust colours, and then we're going to colour over the top, and then we'll do a chip effect. So we need to get on all the rust tones that we're going to use, and we're starting with the darkest, probably a little bit thinner. I could have maybe made it a little bit thicker, but it really doesn't matter with this. It can be be fairly rough, to be fair, underneath, because we're going to cover it up and you're only going to see portions of it. But we're going to use a few different shades of rust just to give an effect. Now when we do a chip effect, whether it's hairspray or salt or whatever we're going to use, I tend to use brighter rust colours than I would normally use if it's going to be one of the top layers, because not a lot's going to show through, and if they are the darker shades, they end up looking too dark at the end. So we're just going to apply the rust colours randomly, maybe complete panels there along the edges. The top rails seem to rust quite a lot, so we're going to put some of the brighter colours in places like that. But you can put it wherever you like, really, whatever you think looks correct, wherever you think the rust would happen. Now the brighter colours are going to be the newer, fresher rust, typically. So something that rusts more frequently, such as like underneath the top rails, maybe, you would do them in a lighter colour. So this is our mid-tone. I'll put the colours in the description below for reference later on if you want to copy any of these. That's our two colours, and then we've got another one which is the brighter orange. We're just going to do a few little patches here and there. A lot of this won't be seen, but it's just there just in case when we start to do our chipping effects, we do actually want to reveal the rust in those particular areas. I'm not going to worry about too much about in the middle, inside the wagon, because a lot of that's going to be covered with a load eventually into this build. So you can take as much time over this that you want to. So our next stage is to use a hairspray. Now the reason we use hairspray, there are different chipping fluids you can buy from Vallejo and so on. But the reason we use a hairspray is it's like a release barrier, so it's a water soluble spray. So once we put the top colour on and then we wet through that, the idea is that the hairspray will become wet again, and the top colour won't stick to it, and we get the chip effect. Now we're going to paint this in a kind of a typical mineral type of grey. Again, this is another Vallejo colour, and I'll put the description, the colour in the description. It's not it's not terribly important. We're going to lose a lot of the colour when we start adding some of the grime and the dirt and so on a bit later on. A lot of this is going to come off anyway with the rust effect, with the chipping effect. So we'll give it one coat in this first grey. Now the hairspray we let set for about 20 minutes. The more hairspray you put on, the bigger the chips will be. But you just need to experiment different hairsprays and different amounts of spray. Some people will spray it, decant it and put it straight from their gun. I just use it straight from the can. So just going to do a couple of panels as if the wagon's had a repair and the paint is a slightly different shade. Then we need to wait for the layer to for that particular layer to dry off. I'll probably only leave it 10-15 minutes, not a great deal of time, just enough time to clean up the airbrush. And then just fresh water on your brush, brush it over, just do this really gently because the will suddenly just all peel off, so just be careful. Different brushes will give you different effects. You can use a stiffer brush if you want lots more off, a thinner brush if you want to be a bit more precise, if you want particular areas of rust like runs from bolts and rivets and hinges, etc. I'm just going to take off the top colour and reveal the rust kind of in the areas that I think it would look best and probably would happen in the real world. So that's the first one. We're going to leave the newly painted, like the darker grey areas, because they've been repaired at some point later in the wagon's life, so probably won't have as much rust showing through, but there will be a little bit. So all the raised areas, if we just go very lightly over there, you'll start to reveal the rivet works and the frames, because they would get knocked and the paint would chip off and they'll be more likely to rust. And these doors are going to have a bit of use in their life anyway, and again they're going to get bashed around. If you want to start the rust at a particular place, you can always use different things like sticks and that was a putty modelling knife I think I was using there, but sometimes it helps to start the process off if you need to. That's that side done for now. That's started anyway. We'll come back to that, I'm sure, in a sec. And then we'll do something similar on the other side. Maybe some slightly different sort of patterns and effects. So we're using a stiffer brush. This one is just an old brush that I've managed to chop the top off because it got glue in it or something. But that takes more off, and you get a different effect. So much more rust is showing through. Adding a few scratches in, and then we'll just go over the brush just to soften the scratches up a little bit, as if the rust has taken hold underneath and blown the paint off a little bit more. Then on this panel I wanted kind of a big area in the middle where all the rust has taken pretty much all of the paint off. Just scratch around the edge just to give a little mark down the end. You can add scratches like this, as I say, if you want, you know, something precise. If it's maybe run along, something scratches along the side, and it started to rust in that way. At the ends as well, as much as little, lots of raised detail on this particular wagon, so it's quite nice just to brush over the top, and that reveals a lot of the that detail. Now, because the surface of this wagon is a bit rough because of the original that white sort of emulsion Tipex type paintwork on it, some of that effect is showing through. If it's a smoother wagon, it may look slightly different. It's a matter of experimenting, really. Now, if you've done two colours, and we've done it after the second colour, like this darker grey, this will be obviously thicker, so that it's a bit tougher for the hairspray to start popping through. So because you can use the stiffer brush on the bottom there just to reveal the rivets at the bottom edge. And you find that different colours and different brands of paints, different hairsprays, they'll all act differently. So you need to try a few and see which works best for you. So the top edge will be pretty well beaten up, so we're going to take quite a bit of paint off the top there, and around the inside just going to wet that so it starts to work while we're finishing the top. And use the stiff brush again, and that's going to take a lot of the grey off the top. And then inside, we're just going to really concentrate on the top of the inside because there is going to be a load in there. We're not going to see that much. But we'll just get a bit of rust to start bursting through there. I hope that was clear. Coat of lacquer, again enamel from a can, just so we can do a couple of decals. Not particularly an expert at decals, decals, whatever they're called, but we're just going to do a few just to make it look a little bit more different, prototypical, whatever word you want to use. And these are sort of MDV, I think, are typical of Mineral Wagons. I'm sure some will know better than me and maybe can leave a comment down below for me. But they look like the type of markings that you'd get on Mineral Wagons like this. And the reason we've put a lacquer on there is just so that the decals will dry and adhere to the wagons better. And I finished this off with Microsol, and I'll put the description down below for that as well. Now for some little rust runs, we're using these oils. Again, that's another reason for using the lacquer, just to give it a nice surface. So these are the MIG oil brushes, and we're just going to do a few small dots where you want the rust to start running from, and you can use some sort of theory of where rust would be, or just go random. rogue. Just real tiny amounts, you really don't want a lot of this on. And we'll do the run effects in a moment. The good thing about oils is that they take about a day to dry properly, so you've got quite some time to do this. There's no rush. If you don't like the effect, you can use your thinners and just take the whole thing off again and reapply the rust. Or if you've got a bit of rust you don't like the look of, just take that one little bit out or modify it with a small brush. There we go. Now we've left that maybe 15 minutes or so to dry, and we're using a soft brush dipped in thinners, and we've rubbed as much of that off as we can, so it's fairly dry now. And then just gently drag it over the rust, and you can see that the top will stay a little bit where it is, and then you'll get the drag effect as you put it down. So with this one we're trying to be, you know, fairly subtle, which is unlike me. But just some rust, some highlights, some high spots of rust that popped through and created that rum. Now some of the bigger areas of rust, if we do a darker brown centre, that will give more of an aged effect. Older rust is the darker colour, generally speaking. So the centre would have a darker patch. We're just going to do, again, a very small amount. Same with the damp thinners brush. Just drag down ever so slightly with these. They wouldn't run as far generally. Now on to some of the final stages. We're going to just add some grime and mud to the chassis and the frame. This is a Vallejo Air. Earth red, I think it is, and I'll put the description down below. Looks a bit bright on the camera. Vallejo airs do dry darker anyway, so that isn't really the sort of the shade that it's going to end up. And we're going to add some more powders to darken it down again. So when you go around, I tend to spray up just a little bit up the edges. The fronts and the backs of the wagons would probably get less cleaning, if any, so they will be a bit more grimy than the sides may be. So once we've done all that, we're going to add just like a shade to the top. This is a really dark brown. I think this is German Panzer brown or something. Again, the colour will be in the description down below. It's just to add this kind of sooty effect to the tops and the rowels. I like to add a little bit in the middle of the axles where we're going to get some grease to splash up, and that'll give a sort of darker centre to the axles. Not forgetting the wheels. Colour as well. And now on to our weathering powders. So I tend to use all my powders in from the centre of the palette. So I've got a couple of different colours in there at the moment. So the two main ones I'm going to use is this dark red ochre pigment from Vallejo, and then my Humbrol dark earth, and they're both in the well of the palette. And the reason for doing that is that I can mix them together and have slightly different shades. So I haven't just got the two colours, but there's probably other colours in there from previous builds. So we're going to put the brighter red ochre on first, which is like the proper rust colour. Again, it looks a bit more brighter on the camera than it will eventually. It will darken down when we use the mother powders over the top, and when we lacquer it again, it's going to go off a little bit, but it probably looks a little bit brighter there than it is actually. It's just the camera showing the colours up like that. Bit of rust and weathering on the wheels. Again, not too much work on the inside because we're not going to see a lot of it anyway. I'm just brushing the loose powders out of the way there, in case I decided not to fit a load, but as you'll see, I'll fit a load after. So we need to seal all the weathering powders in. Acrylic matte, so we don't want it any sort of shine on it, so we're just going to use matte rather than in satin, etc. And as you'll see, when you use the varnishes, the colours will dull down a little bit. So the bright orange from the rust has now started to go. It's more of a muddy brown down the bottom there, and it will all sort of blend together a little bit more. And again, the idea of the varnish is just to protect the pigments and the paint from any handling that the wagon might get. Just a final touch on all of these wagons. I tend to use this axle grease from AK Interactive. It's got to be the final stage because it's an enamel and it will dry with a slight sort of wet sheen. Otherwise, if you spray your matte lacquer over the top, it will go dull and it just look like a black colour. It won't actually have that wet effect. So just dab it wherever you feel appropriate, and let it find its own place. So our final piece on this is going to have a load of a steel load, and these are sort of iron filings. They're the swarf from a local metal worker that I know. These are actually stainless steel. He swept the bottom of his drill, and one tub has lasted me for absolute ages. Don't want to use a lot, obviously it's quite heavy, so we're just going to pad out the bottom of the wagon. I know the size of the wagon, so I'm going to just cut a couple of pieces of this foam core. There we go. It's about 80 by 30. We're going to make it slightly smaller than that, just so there's no don't want it too tight a fit. Lost my ruler. I left it in another room, so the envelope come to hand. And then with my blunt Stanley knife, but my blunt scalpel, which shouldn't be blunt, it just is because I've run out of blades. I do a really poor job of cutting it neatly. Just trying to get an angle for the camera so you can see it. I've got a new setup, so it's a little bit weird at the moment, so my apologies for that. So we cut two pieces, just going to pop them into place. We don't need to glue them, they'll be glued down in a sec anyway. And then put the filings in. So tip it in there. There's different shapes in there, but they're only going to be smaller pieces. And we just need to fill the bottom of the wagon, just so we can't see the card. We don't want too much in there. doesn't have to be steel, you can obviously use coal or coke or any sort of mineral that you choose. Now in our little tub here we've got PVA and water mixed up about 50-50, and a touch of literally just a drop of washing up liquid, and that just breaks the surface tension and allows the mix to soak through the load, whatever load you're going to use, whether it's this or coal. And then I've just sprayed it with just plain water just to make it wet. Again, it just helps with the surface tension and allows the PVA mix to soak down. And just need to add in enough just so you can start to see the level of the PVA sort of come above the load. Then you know you've got enough on there. And it can take anything from a day to 3 or 4 days to set. Depends on the temperature and your mixture. Just let it set, and that's it. So we're going to let this all dry. I'll take some more pictures, and we'll see you on the next one.